Human gave little alien girl his last food. Now she returns years later to repay his kindness. The rusted industrial skyline of Novar Prime was a mockery of what it once had been. Twisted metal spires reached toward an ash-colored sky like the fingers of a dying man. Rain fell in sporadic, acidic bursts, eating away at what little remained of this alien world's former glory. I sat on my cardboard box, the only possession I could truly call mine anymore, in the middle of a deserted street. My icy blue eyes stared vacantly at the cracked pavement. The combat suit I wore, dark, sleeveless, lined with tactical straps and armored plates, had seen better days, much like myself. My massive arms, still corded with muscle despite my age, were exposed to the biting cold. The white beard that cascaded down my chest was the only warmth I had. 10 years. 10 goddamn years on this forsaken rock. I'd come here as a mercenary when the mining corporations still thought they could squeeze blood from this stone. When they pulled out, they left behind their equipment, their trash, and people like me. Expendable assets no longer worth the fuel to transport off-world. My mind drifted back to that night, so long ago. The night that, for some reason, kept haunting me more than all the blood I'd spilled or the friends I'd buried. It had been raining then too. Not this half-hearted drizzle, but a proper deluge that turned the streets into rivers. I'd been huddled in the doorway of an abandoned factory, counting my remaining rations, 1 protein bar, half a canteen of water, and a single can of synthetic meat. The corporations had pulled out 3 days earlier, and the exodus had begun. Those with credits fled, those without waited to die. That's when I saw her, a small figure curled into a ball beside a waste disposal unit. At first, I thought it was just another pile of discarded clothing. But then it moved, and I saw the unmistakable orange skin of a Novarian child, no more than 6 or 7 by their standards. "Hey," I called out, my voice rough from disuse. "You lost, kid!" The child looked up, startled. Large, luminous eyes blinked at me through the rain. She was trembling, whether from cold or fear I couldn't tell. Probably both. I shouldn't have cared. In my line of work, caring got you killed. But something about those eyes, the absolute terror and hopelessness in them, reached past decades of scar tissue around my heart. "You hungry?" I asked, already knowing the answer. She nodded, still pressed against the wall as if expecting me to hurt her. I looked down at my meager supplies. The protein bar would keep me going for another day. The water was essential. The can, well, it was my emergency backup. But the kid looked like she hadn't eaten in days. "Fuck it," I muttered, pulling out the can. I used my combat knife to pry it open, the smell of processed meat filling the air. The child's eyes widened, and I saw her swallow reflexively. "Here," I said, holding it out. "Take it." She didn't move at first, suspicious of the offering. Smart kid. But hunger eventually won out, and she darted forward, snatching the can from my hands before retreating to a safe distance. I watched as she devoured the contents, using her fingers to scoop out every last morsel. When she finished, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Thank you," she said in broken standard, her voice small but clear. I just nodded, already regretting my moment of weakness. That might have been the difference between life and death for me in the coming days. "Go on, get out of here," I said gruffly. "Find somewhere dry." She hesitated, then scurried away into the rain, clutching the empty can to her chest like it was precious. That was the last I saw of her. Until today. I was still sitting on my cardboard box, contemplating whether I had the energy to search for food or if this would be the day I finally gave up, when a shadow fell across me. Looking up, I was struck dumb by what I saw. A Novarian female stood before me, but not like any I'd seen before. Her orange skin seemed to glow with vitality, contrasting with a form-fitting light brown suit that left little to the imagination. The translucent material clung to curves that would make a human supermodel envious. A slim waist, generous hips, and a full chest revealed by a plunging neckline. A khaki-colored hooded cloak draped over flowing silver-white hair, framing a face that was both alien and breathtakingly beautiful. But it was her eyes that froze me in place. The same luminous eyes I'd seen a decade ago. now filled with confidence instead of fear. In her hand, she held something out to me. A can. The same damn can I'd given her all those years ago. "I've come back to repay your kindness," she said softly, her standard now perfect and melodious. My icy blue eyes widened in shock as memories and emotions I'd long buried came rushing back. "You," was all I could manage to say. Her lips curved into a gentle smile. "Me," she confirmed, "and I have much more to offer than just this can." "You kept it," I said, staring at the can in her delicate orange hand. "All these years." Her smile widened, revealing teeth that were whiter than I remembered Novarians having. "I did more than keep it, human. I studied it, every molecule, every trace element." She stepped closer and I caught her scent. Something like cinnamon and ozone. "Your name is Greg Dawson, isn't it?" I tensed. "How do you know that?" "I know many things about you now." She tucked the can away in a hidden pocket of her cloak. "My name is Nira, and I owe you everything." I stood from my cardboard throne, my knees protesting the sudden movement. Even standing straight, she was tall for a Novarian female, the top of her head reaching my chin. Up close, her beauty was even more striking. Her orange skin had a subtle shimmer to it, and her eyes contained flecks of gold that seemed to dance in the dim light. "You don't owe me anything," I said gruffly. "It was just a can of meat." "It was survival when I had none," she countered. "And it was more than food, much more." She glanced around the empty street. "But this is no place for such a conversation. Will you come with me?" Every instinct honed from decades as a mercenary screamed that this was a trap. Yet something about her earnestness made me hesitate. "Where?" "My home, it's not far." She gestured down an alleyway. "I have real food, clean water, a shower." At the mention of a shower, my resolve crumbled. It had been weeks since I had had more than a splash of rainwater to clean myself. "Lead the way," I said. As we walked, I noticed how she moved, graceful but alert, constantly scanning our surroundings. She'd learned to survive in this hellhole too. "You've been watching me," I said. It wasn't a question. "For several days," she admitted without shame. "I needed to be sure it was you, and that you were alone." The implication hung between us. In a place like Nova Prime, companions were either threats or vulnerabilities. After 20 minutes of navigating increasingly narrow passages, she stopped at what appeared to be a solid wall. With practiced movements, she pressed a sequence of bricks, and a section slid aside, revealing a hidden doorway. "Impressive," I muttered. "Necessary," she replied. Her home was a revelation, a modest but comfortable space carved from what must have been an old maintenance facility. Clean, well lit, with actual furniture, a far cry from the cardboard box I'd been calling home. "Please," she said, gesturing to a chair that looked sturdy enough to hold my bulk. "Sit, rest." I lowered myself into the chair, feeling oddly self-conscious about my filthy state in such clean surroundings. "The shower's through there," she said, pointing to a door. "I have clothing that might fit you. A previous visitor left them behind." I raised an eyebrow at that, and she laughed, a musical sound that stirred something in me I thought had died years ago. "Not what you're thinking, human." He was a traitor who needed shelter during a toxic rain event. "And the shower?" I asked, already imagining the luxury of hot water. "Fully functional. I've modified the water recycling system. You can use as much as you need." I didn't need to be told twice. 20 minutes later, I emerged feeling like a new man, dressed in clean clothes that fit surprisingly well. My beard was trimmed, my bald head gleaming. I'd kept my combat knife strapped to my thigh, old habits being what they are. Nira was setting food on a small table. Real food, not the synthetic protein that passed for sustenance on this planet. She looked up as I entered, and I saw her eyes widen slightly as they traced the contours of my still muscular frame. "Better?" she asked, her voice a touch lower than before. "Mutt," I admitted, suddenly aware of the tension between us. It wasn't just gratitude or curiosity in her gaze. There was something else, something primal that transcended our different species. As we ate, she explained how she'd analyzed the can I'd given her, discovering that the preservatives contained a compound that acted as a powerful antibiotic against a disease that had been ravaging her people. "Your simple act of kindness didn't just save me," she said, leaning forward. It saved thousands of my kind. The compound in that food, harmless to humans, but miraculous to us, became the basis for a treatment we desperately needed. Just dumb luck, I said, uncomfortable with the reverence in her voice. Perhaps, or perhaps the universe has patterns we don't yet understand. Her hand moved across the table, orange fingers coming to rest inches from mine. Either way, I've been searching for you ever since I became old enough to do so. The implication wasn't lost on me. I was a different man then, softer, less broken. I don't see anything broken, she said, her eyes holding mine with an intensity that sent heat through my veins. I see strength, endurance, humanity. The way she said that last word, like it was something precious and rare, made my throat tighten. There are people looking for me now, she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. Powerful interests who want the formula I developed. They don't know about you yet, but they will. We can't stay here long. We, I asked, though I already knew my answer. After years of merely surviving, the prospect of purpose, and yes, the company of this fascinating creature, was irresistible. Her fingers bridged the gap between us, touching mine with surprising warmth. Yes, Greg Dawson, we... The night deepened around Nira's hidden sanctuary. We sat close together on a worn couch, the remains of our meal forgotten on the table. Her fingers traced the scars on my forearm, each one a story she seemed eager to hear. This one, she asked, touching a jagged line that ran from my wrist to elbow. Pirate raid on Vega Colony, I said. Bastard had a vibroblade. I had the last laugh, though. Her eyes glittered with interest. And this? Her touch moved to a circular burn mark on my shoulder. Plasma discharge. Weapons malfunction during a corporate extraction job. She leaned closer, her silver white hair brushing against my chest. The scent of her, that strange mix of cinnamon and ozone, filled my senses. Your body tells a history of violence, yet you showed kindness to a starving child. I shrugged, uncomfortable with her admiration. Anyone would have done the same. No, she said firmly. They wouldn't. My people were dying, and your corporations were leaving. No one stopped, except you. Her face was inches from mine now, those golden flecked eyes studying me with an intensity that made my heart pound in a way it hadn't for decades. Nira, I said, my voice rough with emotion I couldn't quite name. I'm an old man. By human standards, perhaps. Her hand moved to my face, fingers tracing the lines at the corners of my eyes. But my people measure age differently. We see vitality, life force. Yours burns brighter than any I've encountered. The tension between us crackled like static electricity. I found myself drawn to her, this alien woman who looked at my battle-worn body and saw something worthy of desire. There are differences, I managed, even as my hand moved of its own accord to the curve of her waist. She smiled, a mischievous expression that transformed her face. Fewer than you might think. My research was thorough. The implication sent heat surging through me. Before I could respond, her lips were on mine. Warm, surprisingly soft, and tasting faintly of the sweet fruit we'd shared at dinner. What followed was a discovery of similarities and differences. A bridge built between two species through touch and whispered guidance. Her orange skin flushed a deeper hue beneath my hands, and she gasped at sensations that seemed new to her. I found myself rediscovering pleasure I thought time had stolen from me, her touch awakening parts of me I'd long neglected. Your heart, she whispered against my chest afterward. It beats so strongly. I stroked her silver white hair, marveling at how it seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. Human hearts are stubborn things. She laughed softly. That explains much about your species. We lay together on her narrow bed, a tangle of orange and pale limbs, when the first explosion shook the building. I was on my feet instantly, decades of combat training overriding everything else. Nira was only seconds behind me, already pulling on her form-fitting suit. They've found us, she said, her voice tight with fear. Who? I demanded, grabbing my clothes. Vex Corporation mercenaries. They must have tracked me when I was watching you. She moved to a panel in the wall, punching in a code that revealed a hidden compartment. From it, she pulled 2 weapons, a sleek pistol for herself and a more substantial rifle that she tossed to me. I caught it one-handed, checking the power cell and sighting mechanism with practiced ease. Standard Vex pulse rifle. Nice. Taken from one of their scouts last week, she explained, moving to a monitor that showed the exterior of the building. 4 of them. Heavy armor. Military-grade weapons. Another explosion rocked the structure. Closer this time. Dust rained from the ceiling. They're trying to flush us out, I said, already calculating angles and cover positions. Is there another exit? Maintenance tunnel. It leads to the old sewage system. She pointed to a hatch in the floor, partially hidden under a rug. I nodded, my mind shifting fully into combat mode. You go first. I'll cover our retreat. Greg, she said, grabbing my arm, these aren't common thugs. They're enhanced. Cybernetic implants, reaction boosters, targeting systems. I grinned, feeling a surge of adrenaline that made me feel 20 years younger. Good. They'll underestimate what a plain old human can do. The door to her sanctuary buckled inward as a breaching charge detonated. I shoved Nira toward the escape hatch, then took position behind an overturned table. The first mercenary through the door was a hulking Draxian. His scaled skin augmented with metallic plates. His head swiveled, cybernetic eyes glowing red as they scanned the room. I waited until the second merc, a spindly Tellurian with mechanical arms, entered before I fired. The pulse rifle bucked against my shoulder as I put 3 shots into the Draxian's chest, finding the gap between his natural armor and cybernetic plating. He went down with a roar of pain and surprise. The Tellurian was faster, those mechanical arms whipping up a weapon that fired a spray of neural disruptors. I rolled left, feeling the static charge as the disruptors missed me by inches. My second burst caught the Tellurian in the face and he dropped without a sound. 2 down, I called to Nira, who had the hatch open but was watching me with wide eyes. Behind you, she screamed. I spun just as a third mercenary, this one looking almost human except for the glowing circuitry visible beneath his transparent skin, lunged through a side door I hadn't noticed. His fist encased in some kind of power gauntlet connected with my ribs. Even through the armor of my combat suit, I felt something crack. Pain exploded through my chest, but I'd been hurt worse. I dropped the rifle and drew my combat knife in one fluid motion, ducking under his second swing and driving the blade up under his chin. The mercenary's augmented strength meant nothing when cold steel severed his spinal cord. As he collapsed, I retrieved my rifle and limped toward Nira. That's 3. Where's the 4th? A shadow moved in the doorway. The last mercenary, a female Syrian with the lower body of a serpent and 4 arms, each holding a different weapon. Down, I shouted, tackling Nira into the open hatch, just as the room erupted in weapons fire. We fell through the hatch into darkness, landing hard on a metal grating. The impact sent fresh waves of pain through my injured ribs, but I bit back a groan. Above us, the room erupted with weapons fire as the 4-armed Syrian mercenary shredded Nira's sanctuary. Close it, I hissed, reaching for the hatch. Nira was faster, slapping a control panel on the wall. The hatch slid shut with a pneumatic hiss, followed by the satisfying thunk of magnetic locks engaging. That won't hold her for long, Nira said, activating a small light on her wrist device. The blue glow illuminated a narrow maintenance tunnel stretching into darkness. Can you move? I've had worse, I said, pushing myself to my feet despite the stabbing pain in my side. Which way? This tunnel connects to the old sewage system. If we follow it east for about half a kilometer, it leads to an abandoned spaceport. She touched my arm, her eyes reflecting the blue light. I have a ship there. A ship? I couldn't hide my surprise. You were planning to leave all along? Her expression softened. I was planning to ask you to come with me. The timing just accelerated. A thunderous boom echoed from above, the Syrian trying to breach the hatch. Tell me about it while we move, I said, gesturing down the tunnel. We set off at a brisk pace, the tunnel occasionally branching or dropping to lower levels. Nira navigated with confidence, selecting paths without hesitation. The air grew damper and carried the faint scent of decay. The spaceport was abandoned when the mining corporations pulled out, Nira explained as we walked. Most ships were salvaged for parts, but I managed to restore one, a small human-built scout vessel. Not fancy, but fast. And where exactly are we planning to go in this scout vessel? I asked, keeping my voice low. A sound carried strangely in these tunnels. There's a human outpost in the Procyon system. They've been researching medical applications of xenobiology. My formula would be valuable to them and to your species. I processed this information. So this is about more than just repaying a personal debt. She stopped at turning to face me in the dim blue light. It's about both. I owe you my life, but I also believe this discovery could help bridge the gap between our peoples. Novarians have biological adaptations that humans lack, and humans have... She trailed off, her hand finding mine in the darkness. What? I prompted. An extraordinary capacity for kindness in the face of adversity, she finished. It's rare among spacefaring species. The compliment warmed me more than it should have. Before I could respond, a distant clang echoed through the tunnel, followed by the distinctive sound of metal being torn apart. She's through the hatch, I said, and she'll have called for backup. Nira nodded grimly. We need to hurry. The next section is tricky. Part of the tunnel collapsed years ago. We'll have to climb through. She wasn't exaggerating. 100 meters further, the tunnel had pancaked, leaving only a narrow gap near the ceiling. Nira went first, her lithe form slipping through with practiced ease. I followed, my larger frame making the passage more challenging. My ribs screamed in protest as I dragged myself through the gap. On the other side, the tunnel opened into what had once been a main sewage junction. Multiple large pipes converged in a circular chamber, most now dry and crumbling. Catwalks crisscrossed the space overhead. Almost there, Nira said. The access to the spaceport is through that northern conduit. We had just started across the chamber when a metallic scraping sound froze us in place. From one of the western pipes, the Syrian mercenary emerged, her serpentine lower body propelling her forward with frightening speed. All four of her arms held weapons, 2 blasters, a neural disruptor, and what looked like a vibroblade. Down! I shouted, pushing Nira behind a concrete barrier as energy bolts sizzled past us. I returned fire with the pulse rifle, forcing the Syrian to take cover behind a support column. The chamber echoed with weapons discharge, the sound amplified by the concrete walls. The northern conduit, Nira said, pointing to an opening about 20 meters away. If we can reach it, I'll cover you, I said, already calculating the angles. When I give the word, run. Don't stop. Don't look back. She gripped my arm. Not without you? I'll be right behind you, I promised, meeting her golden-flecked eyes. Trust me. Something passed between us in that moment, more than attraction, more than the physical connection we'd shared earlier. A bond forged in danger and mutual reliance. I leaned forward and kissed her quickly, the taste of her momentarily drowning out the smell of dust and decay. Ready? She nodded, tensing to run. I popped up from behind our cover and laid down a barrage of suppressing fire, aiming not at the Syrian, but at the structure around her. Chunks of concrete rained down as my shots impacted the already unstable ceiling above her position. Now! I shouted. Nira sprinted for the northern conduit, her orange skin a blur in the dim light. The Syrian emerged from cover, all 4 arms raising weapons to target her. I shifted my aim and fired directly at the mercenary, catching her in the shoulder. She hissed in pain but didn't go down. I broke from cover, running laterally to draw her fire away from Nira. The tactic worked. Energy bolts tracked me instead, one grazing my thigh with a searing pain. I dove behind another barrier, switched the rifle to maximum output, and fired a sustained burst at the junction where the ceiling met the support column. With a groan of tortured metal and concrete, the structure gave way. The Syrian looked up just as tons of debris came crashing down on her position. Her scream was cut short by the thunderous collapse. I didn't wait to see if she survived. Ignoring the burning pain in my leg, I sprinted for the northern conduit where Nira waited, her expression a mix of relief and urgency. This way, she said, leading me into the conduit. The spaceport is just ahead. As we emerged from the tunnel system, the vast, empty expanse of the abandoned spaceport stretched before us, and in the center, illuminated by the first rays of dawn breaking through the perpetual cloud cover, sat a small ship, our ticket off this rock. The ship sat on the cracked tarmac like a promise of freedom, a sleek, human-designed scout vessel with the faded insignia of some long-defunct mining company still visible on its hull. Dawn light glinted off its weathered surface, giving it an almost ethereal quality against the bleak landscape of the abandoned spaceport. "There she is," Nira said, her voice filled with pride. "The redemption." "You named it?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "It seemed appropriate." She squeezed my hand. "Come on, we're almost there." We crossed the open expanse cautiously, keeping to the shadows of derelict loading equipment and collapsed hangars. My injured leg throbbed with each step, and my ribs protested every breath, but the sight of that ship kept me moving forward. As we approached, something felt wrong. The entry ramp was down, and a faint wisp of smoke curled from an open access panel near the engine housing. I grabbed Nira's arm, pulling her behind a cargo container. "Wait, what is it?" "Someone's been here." I nodded toward the ship, and recently, her eyes widened in alarm. "The mercenary? But how could she have?" "Alternative route, maybe, or..." I hesitated, not wanting to voice my suspicion. "Or what?" "Or she wasn't as buried as I thought." Nira's hand went to the pistol at her hip. "What do we do?" I assessed our options. The open tarmac offered little cover between our position and the ship. If the Syrian was waiting inside, she'd have the advantage. "I'll go first," I said. "Draw her out. You circle around to the maintenance hatch on the port side." "No!" Nira's grip on my arm tightened. "We go together or not at all." I started to argue, but saw the determination in her eyes. This wasn't the frightened child I'd saved a decade ago. This was a woman who'd survived on her own in one of the harshest environments in the galaxy. "Together, then," I conceded, "but stay behind me." We approached the ship in a crouch, weapons ready. The entry ramp showed signs of forced entry. The control panel had been ripped open, its wiring exposed. Inside, the main cabin was dark except for the emergency lighting that cast everything in a red glow. "Engine control is this way," Nira whispered, pointing toward the cockpit. We moved through the ship silently, checking each compartment. The galley was clear. So was the small cargo hold. When we reached the cockpit, we found what we were looking for, or rather, what had been looking for us. The Syrian mercenary sat in the pilot's chair, her serpentine lower body coiled beneath her. Two of her 4 arms were busy ripping out components from the navigation system. The other 2 held weapons pointed directly at the doorway where we stood. "Predictable," she hissed, her voice like sandpaper on metal. "I knew you'd come for the ship." I pushed Nira behind me, raising my pulse rifle. "Step away from the controls." The Syrian laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Your weapon is useless, human. I've disabled the engines, navigation, and communications. This vessel goes nowhere." "Why?" Nira demanded. "What does Vex Corporation want with my formula?" "Your formula?" The mercenary's vertical pupils narrowed. "Vex doesn't care about your pathetic medicine. They want you, Novarian, your genetic structure, the way your body adapted to the human compound." I felt Nira stiffen behind me. "What are you talking about?" "Your kind was dying from the Crimson Plague. Then you ingested human preservatives and survived. Not just survived, thrived. Vex wants to know how. They want to weaponize it." The pieces clicked into place. "They want to create a bioweapon," I said. "Something that affects specific species." The Syrian's lipless mouth curved into what might have been a smile. "The human understands. Yes, imagine. Targeted pathogens that can wipe out entire species while leaving others untouched. Valuable for corporate warfare, don't you think?" I felt sick. The simple act of kindness, giving a starving child my last can of food, had set in motion something I could never have imagined. "I won't let that happen," Nira said, her voice steady, despite the tremor I felt in her hand against my back. "You have no choice." The Syrian raised one of her weapons. "Come quietly and I might let the human live." Time seemed to slow. I assessed the cockpit, the distance to the mercenary, the cover available, the weapons in play. The Syrian had the advantage of position and firepower, but she had one critical weakness. She underestimated humans. "Nira," I murmured, barely moving my lips. "When I move, hit the deck." I felt her slight nod against my shoulder. You know, I said conversationally to the Syrian, there's something about humans you should understand. And what's that? She hissed, her patience visibly thinning. We're really good at improvising. I dropped to one knee, bringing the pulse rifle up, not at the Syrian, but at the overhead environmental control panel. The shot hit with pinpoint accuracy, rupturing the coolant line. Pressurized gas exploded into the cockpit, creating an instant fog bank. The Syrian fired blindly, energy bolts sizzling through the mist. I rolled left, coming up behind the navigation console as Nira flattened herself against the deck. Can't see in coolant fog, can you? I called out, drawing her fire while Nira crawled toward the emergency kit mounted on the wall. Your thermal vision doesn't work when everything's the same temperature. The mercenary hissed in frustration, her weapons tracking the sound of my voice. I kept moving, circling the cockpit, staying low. Human, she snarled, I will find you, and when I do… She never finished the threat. Nira had reached the emergency kit and extracted a flare. With a quick twist, she activated it, the brilliant chemical light cutting through the fog. The sudden illumination blinded the Syrian, whose eyes had dilated to compensate for the darkness. She screamed, all four arms reflexively covering her face, leaving her completely exposed. I didn't hesitate. 3 precise shots from the pulse rifle, and the mercenary slumped in the pilot's chair, her weapons clattering to the deck. The silence that followed was broken only by our heavy breathing and the hiss of the ruptured coolant line. Nira rose shakily to her feet, the flare still clutched in her hand, casting her orange skin in an otherworldly glow. Is she asked. I checked the Syrian's pulse. Dead. Nira moved to my side, her free hand finding mine. You saved my life, again. I looked down at her, this remarkable woman who had transformed from a starving child into someone willing to risk everything to repay a simple kindness. In that moment, despite our differences, despite the danger still facing us, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Hope. Let's call it even, I said, pulling her close. Now, how bad is the damage to the ship? With the Syrian mercenary's body secured in the cargo hold, Nira and I turned our attention to the damaged ship. The cockpit was a mess, coolant fog still lingering in the corners, control panels torn open, and components scattered across the floor. How bad is it? I asked, watching as Nira's nimble fingers sorted through the wreckage of the navigation system. She frowned, her orange skin catching the emergency lights in a way that made her look like she was glowing from within. Primary navigation is destroyed. Life support is functional but compromised. The engines… She moved to another panel, her expression brightening slightly. The engines are damaged but not beyond repair. Can we fly it? Not to Procyon, not without navigation. She looked up at me, determination hardening her features. But we might make it to the orbital station at Terrace Minor. It's only a short jump from here. I nodded, already calculating our odds. And from there we could secure passage to human space. Exactly. She stood, wincing slightly as she straightened. I noticed a dark stain on her side, a tear in her form-fitting suit revealing a wound I hadn't seen before. You're hurt, I said, moving toward her. She waved it dismissively. It's nothing. The Syrian caught me with a glancing shot during the fight. I gently turned her to examine the injury. The wound wasn't deep, but the edges had an unnatural blue tinge that concerned me. This needs treatment. Later, she insisted, the ship first. I wanted to argue but recognized the stubborn set of her jaw. Fine. What do you need me to do? For the next 2 hours, we worked side by side repairing the Redemption. Nira focused on the navigation and communication systems, her knowledge of the ship's technology impressive. I handled the mechanical repairs to the engines, drawing on decades of field experience maintaining equipment in hostile environments. Our different approaches became evident quickly. Nira worked methodically, each movement precise and calculated. I relied more on intuition and improvisation, finding unconventional solutions when standard repairs weren't possible. That's not in the manual, she observed as I bypassed a damaged fuel regulator, using parts from the galley's food processor. I grinned, wiping sweat from my brow. Manuals are for people with spare parts. She laughed, the sound warming me more than it should have. Is that a human saying? It is, now. As we worked, the ship gradually came back to life. Systems rebooted, lights flickered on, and the gentle hum of the engines began to build. Outside, the sun climbed higher, baking the tarmac and turning the abandoned spaceport into a shimmering mirage. During a break to check the external hull integrity, Nira suddenly swayed on her feet. I caught her before she could fall, alarmed at the heat radiating from her orange skin. "Medical bay." "Now," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. The ship's medical facility was small but functional. I helped Nira onto the examination table and activated the diagnostic scanner. The results confirmed my fears. The wound was infected and her body temperature was dangerously elevated. "The Syrians' weapons must have been coated with something," I muttered, searching through the medical supplies for antibiotics. Nira caught my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong, despite her weakened state. "It won't work. Not on me." "What do you mean?" She reached into a hidden pocket of her suit and withdrew a small vial filled with dark orange liquid. "This is what they're really after. My blood." I stared at the vial, understanding dawning. "The adaptation." She nodded weakly. "When I ingested the preservatives from your food, my body didn't just resist the crimson plague. It incorporated the compound into my cellular structure. My blood contains antibodies that can neutralize almost any pathogen." "A universal vaccine," I whispered, "or a universal weapon in the wrong hands." She pressed the vial into my palm. "This is why I came back for you, Greg, not just to repay a debt, but because I needed someone I could trust. Someone who understood kindness without expecting reward." The weight of her words settled over me. This small vial could change the course of interspecies medicine or warfare, and she had trusted me with it. "What do you need, Washi?" I asked. "A transfusion. My own blood, untainted by the toxin." She gestured to a medical device on the wall. "The synthesizer can create it from the sample." I worked quickly, following her instructions to program the medical synthesizer. Within minutes, it had produced a bag of orange fluid matched to her genetic profile. As I connected the transfusion line to her arm, her fingers intertwined with mine. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For proving me right about humans." The transfusion took effect quickly. Color returned to her face, and the blue tinge around her wound began to fade. As her strength returned, so did the urgency of our situation. "Vex will send more mercenaries when they realize their operative failed," she said, sitting up. "We need to finish the repairs and leave." The final repairs took another hour, both of us working with renewed purpose. When the last system came online, Nira smiled triumphantly. "We did it," she said. "The redemption is ready." I closed the access panel I'd been working on and turned to her. In the proper lighting of the ship, with the immediate danger behind us, I was struck again by how beautiful she was and how much she had changed from that frightened child I'd helped so long ago. "You did most of it," I admitted. "I just held tools and looked pretty." She laughed, moving closer to me. "You did more than that. Much more." The air between us seemed to charge with electricity. Her hand found my face, fingers tracing the lines at the corners of my eyes with a tenderness that made my heart ache. "In my culture," she said softly, "there is a belief that souls can recognize each other across time and space, that connections formed in one moment can echo through a lifetime." "And what do you believe?" I asked, my voice rough with emotion. "I believe that when you gave me that can, you gave me more than food. You gave me hope, purpose." Her golden-flecked eyes held mine. "A reason to find you again." What followed was a connection that transcended our different biologies, a coming together that felt both alien and perfectly natural. Her skin against mine, warmer than a human's, created sensations I'd never experienced before. We discovered each other slowly, learning the differences and similarities between our species with wonder and delight. Afterward, as we lay in the narrow bunk of the captain's quarters, her silver-white hair spilling across my chest, the ship's sensors began to wail. "Proximity alert," Nira said, instantly alert. "Something's approaching." We rushed to the cockpit, hastily dressed, to find the radar showing multiple vessels entering the atmosphere. "Vex reinforcements," I said grimly. "They're earlier than I expected." Nira slid into the pilot's seat, her fingers dancing across the controls. "Engines are at 80%. It's enough to break atmosphere." Then let's not waste any more time on this rock. As the Redemption's engines roared to life, lifting us from the cracked tarmac of the abandoned spaceport, I looked down at the desolate landscape of Novar Prime, the place where I'd lost everything and somehow, against all odds, found something worth fighting for again. The Redemption shuddered as we broke atmosphere, the damaged engines straining against Novar Prime's gravity. Through the viewport, the perpetual cloud cover gave way to the star-studded blackness of space. For the first time in years, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, the oppressive burden of that dying world finally falling away. "We've got company," Nira said, her voice tight as she gestured to the radar. 3 blips were rising from the planet's surface, their trajectories clearly aimed at intercepting us. "Vex pursuit ships," I confirmed, strapping myself into the co-pilot seat. "Military grade. Faster than us, especially with our damaged engines." Nira's fingers danced across the navigation console. "Terrace Minor Orbital Station is here," she said, highlighting a point on the display. "But we'll never outrun them in a straight line." I studied the star chart, noting the asteroid field between us and the station. "We don't have to outrun them. We just have to outsmart them." Her golden-flecked eyes met mine, understanding dawning. "The Keller Belt." "Exactly," I grinned, feeling a rush of adrenaline that made me feel decades younger. "Those corporate ships are built for speed and firepower, not maneuverability. The belt will even the odds." Nira adjusted our course, sending the Redemption hurtling toward the dense field of asteroids. Behind us, the Vex ships accelerated, closing the distance rapidly. "They're within weapons range," she warned. As if on cue, the ship rocked as energy blasts struck our rear shields. Warning lights flashed across the console. "Shields at 60%, Nira reported. "We can't take much more of that." I took the controls, my old combat pilot training coming back like muscle memory. "Let me drive." The first asteroids loomed ahead, massive chunks of rock and ice spinning silently in the void. I guided the Redemption into the belt, weaving between the larger bodies while using the smaller ones as cover from our pursuers. "They're splitting up," Nira said, watching the radar. "Trying to flank us." I nodded, my focus absolute. "That's their first mistake." The Redemption responded to my touch like an extension of my body. Despite the damage, despite her age, she was a human-built ship, designed with intuition and adaptability in mind. I pushed her through gaps that seemed impossibly narrow, skimmed the surfaces of asteroids to mask our heat signature, and used the natural gravitational eddies of the belt to gain bursts of speed. Behind us, one of the Vex ships misjudged a turn and clipped an asteroid. Its shields flared brilliantly before failing, and the impact sent it spinning out of control into a larger rock formation. The explosion briefly illuminated the belt around us. "One down," I said grimly. Nira looked at me with something like awe. "Where did you learn to fly like this?" "Earth Navy before I went private. Asteroid racing was how we spent our leave time." I threw the ship into a tight spiral to avoid a cluster of ice fragments. Not exactly regulation, but it taught us skills they don't cover in the manual. The remaining 2 Vex ships were still in pursuit, but more cautiously now. One stayed directly behind us, while the other attempted to circle around and cut us off. "They're hurting us," Nira observed. "Let them think it's working." I pointed to a particularly dense cluster of asteroids ahead. "See that formation? On my mark, I want you to cut power to the port thrusters and reroute everything to starboard." She nodded, hands poised over the controls. "Ready." We hurtled toward the asteroid cluster, the Vex ships closing in from both sides. At the last possible moment, I gave the command, "Now." Nira executed the maneuver perfectly. The Redemption pivoted sharply, seeming to stall before rocketing off at a 90-degree angle. The Vex ship that had been attempting to cut us off couldn't adjust in time. It plowed directly into the path of its companion, their shields colliding in a spectacular cascade of energy. They didn't explode, but the collision left them tangled and drifting, their engines sputtering as emergency systems engaged. "That buys us some time," I said, plotting a direct course to Terrace Minor, "but they'll be after us again once they sort themselves out." Nira's hand found mine on the control panel, her orange fingers intertwining with my pale ones. "That was incredible." I felt a surge of pride at her admiration. "Just an old human trick." The Tari's minor orbital station appeared on our long-range scanners, a sprawling structure of interconnected modules and docking arms. As we approached, Nira opened a communication channel. Tara's Control, this is Novarian Research Vessel Redemption, requesting emergency docking and asylum. We are being pursued by hostile corporate forces. The response was immediate, a human male voice crackling through the speakers. Redemption, this is Tara's Control. We have you on our scopes. You're cleared for emergency docking at Arm 7. Be advised, we're detecting a human scientific expedition vessel currently docked, the ESS Darwin. Nira and I exchanged surprised looks. A human scientific vessel? Here? Confirm that, Control, I said, taking over the comm. This is Greg Dawson aboard the Redemption. What's the Darwin's mission profile? Xenobiology and medical research, Mr. Dawson. They've been studying the aftermath of the Crimson Plague on the Novarian population. It seemed too perfect to be coincidence. I glanced at Nira, who was staring at the station with renewed hope. The universe has patterns we don't yet understand, she murmured, echoing her words from earlier. As we docked at Arm 7, station security met us with weapons drawn, standard procedure for vessels claiming asylum, but they lowered their arms when they saw me, a fellow human, helping an injured Novarian from the ship. We need to speak with the Darwin's research team, I told the security chief. Immediately. It's a matter of galactic importance. Before he could respond, the dock doors opened and a group of humans in science uniforms rushed in. The leader, a tall woman with silver-streaked black hair, stopped short when she saw Nira. My God, she breathed. You're one of them? One of the survivors? Nira straightened, her dignity evident despite her exhaustion. I am, and I have something you need to see. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical examinations, debriefings, and explanations. The Darwin's research team was indeed studying the Crimson Plague, trying to understand why some Novarians had survived when most had perished. When Nira revealed her blood sample and explained its properties, the scientists were ecstatic. This could revolutionize cross-species medicine, Dr. Eleanor Reeves, the expedition leader, explained, as we sat in the station's observation lounge. The way your body adapted to the human preservative compound is unprecedented. And it all started with a can of food, Nira said, her hand finding mine under the table. Dr. Reeves looked between us curiously. You two have quite a story. Care to share it? So we did. I told her about giving my last can of food to a starving alien child, and Nira explained how that simple act had saved not just her life, but potentially thousands of others. The compound in the preservatives triggered a mutation in my immune system, she said. It allowed me to survive the plague and develop antibodies that could be synthesized into a vaccine. But Vex Corporation wanted to weaponize it, I added. Create targeted pathogens that could wipe out specific species. Dr. Reeves's expression hardened. That's why we're here, actually. We've been tracking Vex activities for months. The Earth Confederation has concerns about their bioweapon research. Then you'll help us? Nira asked. More than that, Dr. Reeves said with a smile. We want to offer you both positions with our team. Mr. Dawson, your military background and first-hand knowledge of corporate tactics would be invaluable to our security division. And Nira, your scientific insights and your unique biology make you the perfect research partner. I looked at Nira, seeing my own surprise reflected in her eyes. After years of mere survival, the prospect of purpose, of making a difference, was almost overwhelming. We accept, Nira said without hesitation, her fingers tightening around mine. 6 months later, I stood at the viewport of the Darwin's observation deck, watching as Earth grew larger in the distance. Beside me, Nira's orange skin contrasted beautifully with the formal white uniform she wore as the expedition's new xenobiology chief. Nervous? I asked, noting the way she fidgeted with the collar of her uniform. A little, she admitted. I never thought I'd see Earth, let alone be welcomed as a scientific ambassador. I pulled her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit against me, despite our different biologies. You've earned it. The Novarian human adaptive vaccine is going to save millions of lives across a dozen species. None of it would have happened without you, she said softly, without that one can of food. I thought back to that rainy night on Novar Prime, to the desperate choice I'd made to help a starving child. How could I have known that simple act of kindness would lead to this moment? to revolutionary medical breakthroughs, to interspecies cooperation, to finding love with the most unlikely person in the galaxy? You know what humans say, I murmured, pressing my lips to her forehead. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness have the greatest impact. Neera smiled up at me, her golden-flecked eyes shining with emotion. Is that really a human saying? I laughed, holding her tighter as Earth's blue oceans and white clouds became visible through the viewport. It is now,